The summer of 1881 draped Washington, D.C. in a suffocating humidity. The air, thick and heavy, clung to everything, mirroring the unease that seemed to permeate the very foundations of the fledgling nation. President James A. Garfield, a man of humble beginnings and towering intellect, felt the weight of that unease pressing down on him as he prepared for his long-awaited vacation. He craved the respite, the endless political battles, the constant scrutiny, and the gnawing feeling that he was perpetually surrounded by enemies both seen and unseen had begun to take their toll. He stood before the mirror in his office, adjusting his tie. His reflection stared back, a man prematurely aged, his eyes holding a weariness that belied his still youthful face. The burdens of the presidency, he thought, were far heavier than any he had imagined during his days as a congressman and a general. The compromises, the betrayals, the constant pressure to appease warring factions within his own party, it all chipped away at a man's soul. He thought of Lucretia, his beloved wife. She deserved a break from the relentless demands of being the First Lady. She'd been ill recently, worn down by the constant social engagements and the prying eyes of the public. A trip to the cooler climes of Elberon, New Jersey, was just what she needed to recover her strength. He smiled faintly. He pictured her face, her gentle smile, her unwavering support. He owed her everything. She had been his rock, his confidant, his guiding star through the turbulent years of their marriage. He finished adjusting his tie, a simple act of defiance against the encroaching weariness. He would not succumb, not yet. He had a nation to lead, a vision to fulfill, and a promise to keep to his wife and children. He picked up his valise, the leather worn and scuffed from countless journeys. It was a tangible reminder of the long and arduous path he had travelled to reach this point. He glanced around the office, a space that had quickly become both a sanctuary and a prison. The portraits of past presidents stared down at him, their silent judgment a constant presence. He took a deep breath and walked out the door, unaware that the shadows were closing in, that fate had already set in motion a chain of events that would forever alter the course of American history. Charles Guiteau, a man consumed by delusion and driven by a festering sense of entitlement, paced nervously outside the 6th Street station. The sweat plastered his thin hair to his forehead, and his eyes darted around, filled with a manic energy. He clutched a Webley British Bulldog revolver in his pocket, its cold steel a chilling contrast to the sweltering heat. He had purchased it specifically for this purpose, a weapon he believed would secure his place in history. He saw himself as a patriot, a saviour of the Republican Party, a man destined for greatness. He was convinced that President Garfield was leading the nation down a path of ruin, and that only his, Guiteau's, decisive action could prevent disaster. He had been a lawyer, a preacher, a bill collector, and a writer, failing miserably at each endeavour. He blamed others for his failures, convinced that he was a victim of circumstance, a genius unrecognised and unappreciated. He had become obsessed with politics, particularly the Republican Party, and he had convinced himself that he was instrumental in Garfield's election victory. He had even written a speech in support of Garfield, which he believed had swayed the election in his favour. He had expected to be rewarded for his efforts, to be appointed as the US consul to Paris, a position he felt he was eminently qualified for. But his requests had been ignored, his letters unanswered. He had been dismissed as a crackpot, a nuisance, an insignificant nobody. The rejection fueled his resentment, transforming his delusions into a burning rage. He convinced himself that Garfield was betraying the party, that he was surrounded by corrupt advisers, and that he was leading the nation towards chaos. He began to see himself as an instrument of divine justice, chosen by God to rid the nation of this malignant presence. He spent weeks stalking Garfield, following him to church, to public events, and to the White House, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. He was a man teetering on the edge of madness, his grip on reality slipping with each passing day. He heard voices, saw visions, and believed that he was acting on the will of a higher power. He saw the president arrive at the station, surrounded by a small entourage. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest, and stepped forward, the revolver heavy in his pocket. The moment of destiny had arrived. He was about to make his mark on history, to become a legend, a hero, or so he believed. He raised the revolver, his hand trembling slightly. He closed his eyes, whispered a prayer, and fired. The sound echoed through the station, shattering the morning calm and plunging the nation into mourning. The bullets found their mark, piercing the president's back. Garfield cried out in pain, collapsing to the ground. The assassination had begun. The nation would never be the same. The mystery, however, was only just unfolding, the layers of conspiracy and hidden agendas yet to be revealed, the true motives of Charles Guiteau buried beneath a mountain of delusion and political intrigue. The chaos that erupted at the 6th Street station was instantaneous and overwhelming. Shouts filled the air, bodies surged forward, and the acrid smell of gunpowder hung heavy in the suffocating atmosphere. President Garfield lay bleeding on the floor, his face contorted in pain. His aides and bodyguards scrambled to his aid, attempting to staunch the flow of blood. Lucretia, who had been waiting inside the station, rushed to his side, her face a mask of terror and disbelief. The scene was one of utter pandemonium. The once orderly train station had transformed into a scene of utter bedlam. Charles Guiteau, momentarily stunned by the enormity of his act, stood frozen in place, the revolver still clutched in his hand. He made no attempt to escape. He seemed almost relieved, as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He was quickly apprehended by the authorities, his face a strange mixture of defiance and triumph. He proclaimed himself a stalwart, a member of the conservative faction of the Republican Party, and declared that he had acted to save the nation from the clutches of the half-breeds, the more moderate wing of the party aligned with Garfield. His words were rambling and incoherent, but they hinted at a deeper political struggle, a power struggle that had been simmering beneath the surface of American politics for years. The nation watched in horror as news of the assassination attempt spread like wildfire. Disbelief quickly turned to outrage, and then to a profound sense of grief. The future of the nation hung in the balance. The fragile unity that had been forged in the aftermath of the Civil War seemed to teeter on the brink of collapse. In the days and weeks that followed, President Garfield clung to life, his condition fluctuating wildly. The nation held its breath, praying for his recovery. Doctors flocked to his bedside, eager to offer their expertise, but their efforts proved largely ineffective. The medical practices of the time were woefully inadequate. The germ theory of disease was still in its infancy, and antiseptic procedures were not widely practiced. The doctors probed the president's wounds with unsterilized instruments, introducing infection into his body. Garfield's condition worsened. He developed a raging fever, and his body became racked with pain. He suffered from abscesses and blood poisoning. The doctors were unable to locate the bullets lodged in his body, and their repeated attempts to extract them only exacerbated his suffering. Lucretia remained by his side, her unwavering love and devotion a constant source of comfort. She read to him, held his hand, and whispered words of encouragement. But even her presence could not alleviate his suffering. He was slowly slipping away, his life ebbing away with each passing day. The political landscape shifted dramatically in the wake of the assassination attempt. Vice President Chester A. Arthur, a man viewed with suspicion by many reformers, found himself thrust into the role of acting president. He was a stalwart, a close ally of Roscoe Conkling, the powerful New York senator who'd been locked in a bitter feud with Garfield. Many feared that Arthur would reverse Garfield's policies and return the nation to the corrupt practices of the spoils system. Arthur, however, surprised many by pledging to uphold Garfield's legacy and to continue his efforts to reform the civil service. He recognized the gravity of the situation and the need to maintain stability during a time of national crisis. Meanwhile, investigators delved into the background of Charles Guiteau, attempting to unravel the mystery of his motives and to determine whether he had acted alone or as part of a larger conspiracy. They discovered a trail of failed businesses, unpaid debts, and delusional fantasies. They also uncovered evidence of his obsession with the Republican Party and his belief that he was entitled to a political appointment. But the investigators also uncovered hints of a deeper plot, whispers of political intrigue and backroom deals. They learned that Guiteau had been in contact with several prominent stalwarts, men who had openly opposed Garfield's policies and who stood to benefit from his removal from office. They also discovered that Guiteau had been promised financial support and legal assistance by some of these individuals. The evidence was circumstantial, but it suggested that Guiteau may have been a pawn in a larger game, a tool used by powerful forces to achieve their political objectives. The investigation was hampered by political interference and a lack of resources. Many within the Republican Party were reluctant to pursue the conspiracy theory, fearing that it would further divide the party and damage its reputation. The truth remained elusive, shrouded in secrecy, and obscured by political maneuvering. The shadows of conspiracy deepened, and the whispers of power grew louder. The nation was left to grapple with the unsettling possibility that the assassination of President Garfield was not the act of a lone madman, but a carefully orchestrated political assassination. The unravelling of the mystery had only just begun, and the secrets it held threatened to shake the very foundations of American democracy. The weight of unspoken truths pressed down on the nation, a silent burden that threatened to suffocate the promise of a more perfect union. President Garfield's suffering stretched on through the long, sweltering summer. Each day brought new complications, new torments. The initial optimism that had flickered after the assassination attempt faded, replaced by a grim acceptance of the inevitable. The doctors, despite their best intentions and the advancements of the era, were ultimately helpless. Their interventions, often more harmful than helpful, served only to prolong his agony. The nation watched, transfixed, as the drama unfolded day by day in the newspapers and telegraph wires. Prayers were offered, vigils were held, and the hope for a miraculous recovery slowly dwindled. Lucretia remained steadfast by his side, her strength a beacon in the darkness. She shielded him from the worst of the news, read to him from his favourite books, and held his hand as he drifted in and out of consciousness. Her love was a constant, a tangible presence in the sterile sick room. Garfield, though weakened and ravaged by infection, remained remarkably lucid. He spoke of his dreams for the nation, his regrets, and his love for his family. He knew that his time was short, and he faced death with a quiet dignity that inspired awe and admiration. He dictated letters to his children, offering them guidance and encouragement. He spoke to his cabinet members about the importance of preserving the Union and upholding the Constitution. He forgave Charles Guiteau, expressing his hope that the assassin would find peace and redemption. His words were a testament to his character, a reflection of the man he was, both before and after the tragedy. The investigation into the assassination continued, albeit at a glacial pace, hampered by political considerations and a lack of cooperation from key figures. Detectives interviewed witnesses, examined evidence, and pieced together the events leading up to the shooting. They uncovered a web of connections between Guiteau and prominent stalwarts, but the evidence remained largely circumstantial. The conspiracy theory gained traction, fueled by rumours and speculation in the press. Many believed that Guiteau was merely a puppet, acting on the orders of powerful forces who sought to undermine Garfield's presidency. Roscoe Conkling, the leader of the stalwart faction, came under intense scrutiny. His bitter feud with Garfield was well known, and his close ties to some of Guiteau's associates raised suspicions. Conkling vehemently denied any involvement in the assassination, but his denials did little to quell the rumours. The investigation was further complicated by the political climate. The Republican Party was deeply divided, and many feared that a full-blown investigation would only exacerbate the divisions and damage the party's prospects in future elections. Powerful figures within the party worked behind the scenes to limit the scope of the investigation and to protect their own interests. The truth, it seemed, was a dangerous commodity, one that many were willing to bury in order to preserve their own power and influence. The weight of lies grew heavier, obscuring the path to justice and hindering the search for answers. As Garfield's condition deteriorated, a desperate decision was made to move him to Elbron, New Jersey, in the hope that the sea air would aid his recovery. The journey was arduous and painful, further weakening his already fragile state. He arrived in Elbron on September 6, 1881, and was taken to a seaside cottage that had been prepared for his arrival. The change of scenery brought him a brief respite, but his condition continued to worsen. On September 19, 1881, after weeks of suffering, President James A. Garfield succumbed to his injuries. He died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by his family. The nation mourned his loss, the grief palpable and widespread. He was hailed as a martyr, a symbol of hope and progress cut down in his prime. His death marked a turning point in American history, a moment of national reckoning. Vice President Chester A. Arthur was sworn in as president, inheriting the daunting task of leading a nation in mourning and navigating the turbulent political landscape. Arthur, despite his initial reservations, rose to the occasion, proving to be a capable and surprisingly progressive leader. He continued Garfield's efforts to reform the civil service and to promote economic growth. He sought to unite the fractured Republican Party and to heal the wounds that had been inflicted by the assassination. Charles Guiteau was put on trial for the murder of President Garfield. The trial was a media sensation, followed closely by the nation and the world. Guiteau pleaded not guilty, claiming that he was acting on the will of God and that he was merely an instrument of divine justice. His behaviour in court was erratic and bizarre, further fueling the perception that he was insane. He ranted and raved, insulted the judge and the jury, and even attempted to recite poetry. His defence was weak and unconvincing. The prosecution presented a compelling case, arguing that Guiteau was a disgruntled office-seeker who had acted out of personal resentment and political ambition. The jury found Guiteau guilty of murder. He was sentenced to death by hanging. On June 30th, 1882, Charles Guiteau was executed. He went to his death unrepentant, convinced that he was a hero and a martyr. The execution brought a sense of closure to the nation, but it did not erase the questions that lingered about the assassination. The mystery surrounding the true motives of Charles Guiteau and the extent of any potential conspiracy remained unresolved. The assassination of President James A. Garfield had left an indelible mark on American history, a reminder of the fragility of democracy and the ever-present threat of political violence. The truth, buried beneath layers of lies and political intrigue, remained elusive, a haunting ghost in the annals of American history. The immediate aftermath of Garfield's assassination saw a wave of national mourning and a swift, albeit incomplete, attempt to bring justice to his killer. However, the deeper questions surrounding the event persisted long after Guiteau's execution. Historians, journalists, and amateur sleuths alike have continued to examine the circumstances surrounding the assassination, seeking to unravel the remaining threads of mystery and to expose any hidden agendas or conspiracies that may have played a role. The official narrative, that Guiteau was a lone madman driven by delusional fantasies and personal grievances, has been challenged by those who believe that he was merely a pawn in a larger political game, a tool used by powerful forces to achieve their objectives. The evidence for a conspiracy, while circumstantial, is compelling. Guiteau's connections to prominent stalwarts, his promises of financial support and legal assistance, and the political climate of the time all suggest that he may have been acting under the influence of others. Roscoe Conkling, the leader of the stalwart faction and a bitter rival of Garfield, remains a key figure in the conspiracy theories. His animosity towards Garfield was well known, and his close ties to some of Guiteau's associates raise suspicions. While there is no direct evidence linking Conkling to the assassination, his potential motive and his association with questionable characters cannot be ignored. Another area of investigation has focused on the medical treatment that Garfield received after the shooting. Many believe that the doctor's interventions, rather than saving his life, actually contributed to his death. The medical practices of the time were primitive, and the doctor's repeated probing of Garfield's wounds with unsterilized instruments introduced infection into his body. Some historians argue that Garfield could have survived the assassination if he had received more competent medical care. They point to the fact that the bullets themselves were not immediately life-threatening, and that the infection was the primary cause of his death. The debate over Garfield's medical treatment highlights the limitations of 19th century medicine and the tragic consequences of ignorance and negligence. The legacy of James A. Garfield extends beyond his tragic death. His brief presidency was marked by a commitment to reform, a dedication to public service, and a vision for a more just and equitable nation. He championed civil service reform, advocated for African American rights, and sought to promote economic growth and opportunity for all Americans. His assassination cut short his promising career, but his ideals and his vision continue to inspire generations of Americans. He stands as a symbol of what could have been, a reminder of the potential that was lost and the progress that was delayed. The assassination of President James A. Garfield remains a complex and multifaceted event, one that continues to fascinate and intrigue us today. The mystery surrounding the true motives of Charles Guiteau and the extent of any potential conspiracy may never be fully resolved. The truth, like a ghost from the past, may forever haunt the annals of American history. However, by continuing to examine the evidence, to challenge the official narrative, and to explore the hidden agendas and political intrigues of the time, we can gain a deeper understanding of this pivotal moment in American history and its lasting impact on our nation. The unveiling of the shadows may be a slow and arduous process, but it is a necessary one if we're to learn from the past and to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. The echoes of the past resonate through the present, reminding us of the fragility of democracy and the importance of vigilance in safeguarding our freedoms and our institutions. The story of James A. Garfield is a story of ambition, betrayal, and tragedy. It is a story of a nation struggling to define itself in the aftermath of the Civil War. It is a story that continues to resonate with us today, reminding us of the enduring power of the human spirit and the enduring challenges of building a more perfect union. Furthermore, the intricate details of the assassination reveal not only the darkness within individual hearts, but also the systemic flaws that can corrupt the pursuit of power and justice. It serves as a potent lesson, urging constant self-reflection and the unwavering commitment to ethical governance, for only then can the shadows of conspiracy truly be dispelled and the light of truth illuminate the path forward.